Hello, gameplay video, which I was very fortunate to get passed across from Kawa, as I played him in one of the rounds at the store champs in London. And it's a bit more of an unconventional matchup. I don't know how much yellow green you'll actually see at your store champs. It's still a deck that's around, and I think it's actually good. I mean, to be honest with you, the footage looks awesome. I really like all the overlay and everything, so I really wanted to use this footage. And like I said, it's great if he passed it across to me for my channel. But I think it's also good to get these sort of unconventional matchups. You know, if you're just going to practice against Ruby Amethyst and Ruby Sapphire and all those sorts of decks, you kind of maybe are going to forget about these ones, and then when they come up in the store champs, because people still like yellow green, people still like Mufasa, people still like a lot of decks that we don't see very commonly. So it's good to get the sort of gameplay of it and sort of how do I navigate the deck when it's a matchup that I'm not really expecting. And yellow green, I mean, you still got a lot of the parts of green that will be in green steel and stuff like that. So just in general, how to play against discard. And sort of in the mulligan, we of course want that 1-2, so we get those two questers out as early as we can. We want to get like the 1 drop and the 2 drop just questing as early as possible. Applying pressure and making them have to react to it. It doesn't really matter which one or two, because out of the Mickey or the Robin Hood, because they both get bounced, and we want to Smeed because it just quests for more. And then what we really want to do is a lot of their deck is based around actions. So if we're able to find just a bunch of Peats, we play 4 Peats. And for matchups like this is really why we play 4 Peats. Um, we want to just get as many Peats in our hand as we can. And of course that Baboom as well is going to be useful if they go for the Diablo shift. So yeah, to be honest with you, not the best hand. We have no 1 drop. And actually having to read the John Silver, which so many messages about John Silver. I still really love this card. And imagine if we got the Pete down. Imagine we got this me on two. We can now John Silver and keep the Pete alive for as long as possible. So he's also useful in that aspect. But the hand isn't looking amazing, to be honest with you. I can't remember if we win. I can't actually remember the outcome of these games. But yeah, we really wanted to get a 1 drop down there. We're kind of very grateful that I don't believe they shift the Diablo, but of course if they do, we have the Baboom in hand, so they'd have to shift then sing bare necessities. So them doing a hand check, you'll find a lot of green decks when they do a hand check and they don't have a particularly good answer for um, the response to the Diablo, like a Baboom or a Brawl, they just won't take the shift line for a little bit. Or they might take it just so they can get it out of your hand, but of course with yellow green they have the ability to do bare necessities. So they usually hold it around until they find the bare necessities. And if we get that Calhoun down, she's actually kind of a threat. None of these things can start just like quickly getting quick lore and just questing out. So yeah, we do ink a Cogsworth there, which to be honest with you, now thinking back, I think I would have inked the Baymax over it because nothing's ever really going to have damage on it. And we kind of inked the Cogsworth because they have Under the Sea. But we should be playing more around the fact that well, Cogsworth also has Ward, so if they don't have Under the Sea, they can't use a Bruno, they can't use a bunch of cards. So yeah, we should have probably inked the Baymax there. But you know, this board is still quite threatening. They're pretty much doing their entire game plan the way they want to do it, and we're not really getting set up that well. We have no lore, and for quite a quick deck, that's quite upsetting. But on the draw, you don't really get a lot of lore at the start because it takes a little while to set up. But that inking pattern I just said doesn't really matter because we get another what's it called? We just ink it that turn. Sorry. Don't know why I'm getting a bit flustered on this matchup. We take the Baboom on the Diablo just because they're going to start discarding and drawing cards. So the possibility for them to have that ability to shift Diablo was coming up, and then we wouldn't really have another turn where we could do it. Um, we don't mind them doing things like this now as well, Sing Sudden Chill. I'm not saying we don't mind it. What we basically don't mind is that we can now get 2 lore from that and remove it and take no damage on the Calhoun. So to be honest with you, that's set up quite in a good spot. 2 Prince Johns, you know, 1 Sudden Chill Sing, they get to draw 2 cards. And you kind of have to pray that maybe they don't get the stuff they need. They get more Sudden Chills, and I don't believe Yellow Green plays Hypnotize, but you know, Brunos and different discards. And looking at my opponent, it doesn't appear like they have much that they can use right now. Yep, so we do that and we take the removal straight away. So that's just 2 lore that's staying off the board. John Silver as well, we noticed, is not a May trigger. So there was a possibility that we didn't have the Murkduck mana or something else to play on 4, we probably wouldn't play it. But then again, playing a May trigger on the Calhoun isn't the worst thing in the world. They probably wouldn't quest with these Prince Johns anyway. But the Murkduck mana instantly puts pressure down, and the only out they really have is you're welcome. Otherwise, we're going to be gaining a lot of Law of Return. We know they're not going to play anything that has a lot of strong attackers on their board. They're going to start wanting to build up characters to deal that Murkduck mana. And they do have things like Cricky, and also as well Diablo unanswered. It's interesting because he does hit for two every turn. So I kind of noticed against green still as well. There we go. There's a Diablo now. How useful Diablo can be in loads of different scenarios just because he's evasive. So he'll just be putting two damage on that McDuck mana every turn. If they choose to, if they choose to not do anything else with it. We're inking a lot of Gantus here. I think that's kind of a bad play for me. I kind of get a bit worried about Gantu. I always think that maybe he isn't going to be used that much. Actually, I don't think we ink it in the end. I think we try and play it down. Um, and also as well, something to note with the dock. If we were to play the dock just this turn and discard our entire hand, the Prince Johns would count that as discard, and they get to pick up cards from that. So right now, what really is happening is we're quite fortunate they don't have a lot of discard actions. Uh, uh, Ink a Gantu, play a Gantu. I think it was probably the only Inkable in our hand, but he's a very annoying card for them. They can't use a Muse to bounce it. They can't really. They have to find the Kita to do the Under the Sea. They can Bruno it, which is the only thing that's good. But we did see an Ink Bruno early, so we're kind of thinking, well, they're one Bruno down already. Probably can get one out. And what's probably happened with Kawa's hand is that he's had he's got four uninkables on the board, so his hand probably ended up being just a bunch of uninkable cards, and he's had to ink through the cards he actually wanted to keep just so he can start getting stuff on the board. But yellow green never really has to ink that high anyway, so they probably could cap out at this point and start using the cards, but they sort of inked all of the good ones, like, yeah, we can just quest and get that lore. If Gantu's going to stick for more than one turn, that's just crazy, so now at this point they might even have to trade their useful cards into the Gantu, which is pretty rough. Like a Diablo and a Prince John to take out a Gantu is not a good spot for them. But yeah, they had to ink a lot of their good cards. And to be honest with you, at this point, if we keep getting Peats, we could just uh, start throwing the Peats down, locking them out of doing any discarding, any sort of action-based removal like Under the Sea and Kida, and just keep questing with this stuff until they run them in. Because they can't really remove this Calhoun effectively at all. They actually require both Diablos to run into it, and then Gantu is there to keep questing as well. So they do need to deal with the Gantu. And he's just this card we've noticed as well whilst playing that if he sticks, just how much value he gets. You know, 4 lore a turn. 3 health is not great, but then we use cards like Alice and Cogworth to keep him protected and just keep him going for a bit longer. As you can see in my game with Alphos that's on Spessie's channel, that should link as well. We just got to a point where when we play the Gantu, we have to play the Alice as well. Of course, they could do. We could ward the Gantu with the Alice. They of course could do Grab Your Swords Tinkerbell, but that's 2 cards that they have to cycle through and find. And they might have inked quite a lot of those options or used them at that point anyway. So, to be honest with you, this is quite a demanding board. I think even if they're to start discarding us, we're at 5 ink, so we can just start playing off the top. And as long as we don't just get a bunch of 1 drops, we should be fine. And we just keep throwing them down. Their draw engine though is set up. They've got both draw engines set up. They've got both draw engines set up very, very efficiently. three Prince Johns and 3 Diablos. So yeah, in other games, if you had like a sudden chill in hand or something, this would be such a commanding spot. But right now they didn't. They just had all of these things, and as I said, they had to ink a lot of the cards they found useful, which is quite rough. And I think even that Ursula hitting nothing on 2 was not great, but they were setting up so they could sing Sudden Chill. But as I said, if you had those 3 Diablos, or even 2 Diablos, you could put 4 to 6 damage on that McDuck mana every turn. But right now we are just going to be questing for a lot of lore here. Trying to look at the cards in hand. Yeah. Thing is, yeah, as I say, Doc can be quite an interesting one because he will make me discard and give them the card draw. So we'd want to try and get every card out of our hand as we can. And it's kind of a spot where Under the Sea is not going to do too much, and especially as we're up to 18 lore now, it will be Under the Sea and then deal with every card that we play going forward, which to be honest with you happens with a lot of these games because I didn't really realise the setup that yellow green requires. 1 and 2, they will do some things, but they won't do a lot of things. Um, so they'll set up their 1 drop Diablo, they'll set up their 2 costs so they can sing their sudden chills, and then they'll get their Prince Johns and Diablos down on 3 if they can, or shift them. But in those turns, you can get a lot of questing done, especially if you're on the play. Um, so yeah, I think it's quite a demanding spot to be in right now, and especially as they've invested in doing damage to the mana rather than using your welcome, which they just obviously didn't have, which is just how it goes sometimes. It's just sat there and got a lot of lore every turn. Cricky also would have dealt with it. A Cricky would have been a really good spot because they could have removed everything from the board and stopped all this aggressive lore. But because Gantu got a quest for 4, the mana hasn't been removed until the end of the game. We're just going to be in such a good spot. But we didn't actually get to see the lines that I mentioned in this game, which was like Pete can just lock your opponent out, especially these action-based decks. So not just into yellow green, into green steel as well, into steel song. Those are two good examples of where if you were to just play two Petes in a row, you might be able to lock them out of 2 turns. And if that you've played Pete on 3 and a Pete on 4, and you'll follow up on 5 as a Cogsworth, you're in just a really commanding spot at that point because you've got two 3/3s on board. They can sing the strengths as well, and you've got a Cogsworth setup, so everything gets resist. Maybe not in this matchup. You probably want to go Pete Pete and then play like a Kanzu because the resist doesn't really matter too much, and you're just setting up an under the seaboard. But into other matchups like Steel Song, where you got two 3/3s and a 2/5 of ward, and everything's got resist. That's just such a commanding spot. A lot of their so after the fact that you've stalled them for 2 turns with Steel, they can't use their removal actions. You've also now said, and all of your removal actions do one less effectiveness than they did before. And the same thing for Green Steel as well. When they've got Ursula and Strength for the Raging Fire, you go Pete Pete Cogsworth, and then yeah, everything you've got has been stalled for 2 turns, and now they're not as effective as they were before. So really, we were looking for those Petes and Smees really in this matchup because we wanted the Smees to start questing, and then the Pete to sort of lock them out um, of using a lot of what their deck can do, which is Keeter and Under the Sea. But to be honest with you, sometimes they don't get Keeter and Under the Sea. That's just how it happens. I think a lot of people describe Yellow Green as like I think Heffalumps and Woozles. That's not a bad tech card to put in the list. And they did have Strike a Good Match, which allowed them to draw, and they had the Lilo, the 2-drop Zombie Lilo, which was also a cool tech because you could put that in your discard and then cycle it every turn to either quest or sing when it gets back into the battlefield. So yeah, there were some interesting choices in the list, but yeah, I think with Yellow Green, the way it's been described is that it's quite like a puzzle piece really. It will work sometimes. It's just getting everything together to do Under the Sea and Kida, and finding all those pieces in your hand at the right time and using them and singing up the singers is kind of what you want to do. So they said I've had people describe Yellow Green as not really like playing Lorcana. It's more like trying to figure out a puzzle. So that's a really interesting take. But yeah, we have the lore. Yeah, this was an interesting thing. So they had Heffalumps and Woozles on the Robin Hood, which meant that it couldn't um, quest that turn, so we couldn't actually have lethal. But because they exerted a Prince John, we could use a Calhoun, or we could have used the Robin Hood because the Robin Hood can still challenge to win that turn. And I think at that point they just got so in their head about trying to stop this board for 1 turn, they weren't even thinking about the effects that could happen. So yeah, we'll just skip forward a little bit because we do a little bit of chatting because it was a lovely event and it was nice to catch up with Kawa again. I do tend to meet him at most events, so yeah, just a nice little catch up as well. And yeah, we do always hunt for these babooms. This is a sort of matchup as well. It's worth mentioning that baboom is useful. Majority of the time, you might be like, "There's a Flynn on board. I really want to baboom that because I don't want them getting the lore." Don't go into those sort of traps. And there might be like, "There's a Banzai or something. There's a 3/2 quester, or there's something on board. I just really don't want to be on board, so I'm going to baboom it." But I can tell you, the majority of the time, the most effective thing is just to play your characters onto the board. Instead, the baboon really is there for things that if we don't baboom it, we sort of lose the game. So with yellow green, if they have a Diablo shift, we sort of just tend to lose the game if they're able to get that set up. But and then you've also got Robin Hood shift as well. Having a 3/6 on your opponent's turn at turn 3 is quite big. Queen shift, if they're able to just do a bunch of wheeling, that's really big as well. And even Cinderella, because if you're going to play a Robin Hood or something like that, you might want to take out. It's a bigger one as well. We found was the Simba shift that doesn't really come around as much in Steel Song, but that was another one where it's just if that's on the board, I sort of lose the game. And sometimes you might have later on in the game where it's if this character gets to quest for one more turn, I kind of lose the game. I think we're just walking through what the card does exactly again, just to make sure that everyone knows what Alice does. It's quite a interesting card, I assume. And actually, as well, my copies were in French because we got them in Paris. So a player did in one round ask, "What does Alice do exactly? Can I read it?" And I moved the card around to show them, and they said, I sort of I'm asking to read it because your copies are French, and I was sort of showing them a French copy that they said they already couldn't read. So that was quite funny. Um, but yeah, again, aggressive opener, and it's quite nice to play an aggressive deck again because in other TCGs, I'm always one to want to play the aggro list. I don't particularly like games going on that long. It was more when I joined Lorcana, I kind of wanted to push my game knowledge and try something different. So we went for Sapphire Steel, which of course requires the wheeling and the high rims and stuff like that. But this list has been showing a lot of important stuff. But those Prince Johns, I notice it in green steel a lot more than I do into yellow green. But the fact that he has ward, I have no interaction with that card, has been quite daunting because of course I went from Sapphire Steel, the standard one ramp where you had three grab your swords and you had Tinkerbells, so you did have interaction with it, and the discarding wasn't that bad because you had what's it called? You had the high room and the items set up, so it wasn't that bad to be discarded by them. You never really felt that far behind. But in this deck, of course, we have to race them. We kind of just have to let Prince John do his thing, and if they turn it sideways, we can take the hit. Um, but yeah, sometimes setting up Prince John for them won't be the best thing. You'll find it into Screen Still as well, because yeah, at this point as well, I'll go back to my point about Green Still. I kind of almost I hadn't played against Yellow Green for so long. It almost was like forgetting what cards they play. And game one, I didn't see any bare necessities, and I did mention it in this video, but I kind of forgot. Oh yeah, wait a minute, they have bare necessities. So we kept the Baboon around, but to be honest with you, I think maybe until the Prince John is set up, it's a good idea just to keep it lingering around. But of course, they didn't have one drop Diablo, so they couldn't have shifted it. They could play it on three, but they're more likely play the Ursula instead. But yeah, we probably should have inked that once thinking, right a minute, right, they could play Bare Necessities, they've only got one action in hand. But I think we actually had three non-character things. I think we might have had a Mukdug Manor. Or no, we inked the Strength of the Raging Fire this turn, which was probably safer because, they could play another Ursula and remove it. And we just kind of have to take the chance that they don't have the Bare Necessities in hand. And if they have a sudden chill, it doesn't really matter anyway. I think this is a very aggressive discard turn where we take a while choosing what cards, and they take all of the cards out of our hand anyway, so it doesn't really matter. And this is that thing of what I'm trying to say about yellow green. Sometimes they just have it, and there's not really much you can do. Like I say, it's quite the puzzle piece, where if they have the ability to discard your entire hand when you're at 4 or 3 ink, that's what they're going to do, and there's not much you can do about that. Even a standard wheel version, if he was able to discard, so he's discarded 4 cards from my hand that turn, he's able to do that, and that's the way the deck works. He had to get the right pieces at the right time, he had to combo it, and he had to set it up with the Prince John and the Ursula, but he was able to do that, and let's be honest, no matter what deck you play, that's just going to beat you. Um, yeah, and then we're just topping 5 drops after that, which is kind of rough. I'd say discard can be quite a hard matchup for us, and again, this is a second game where we just haven't found any of them Pete's. If we're able to, if they were to play Prince John, then our turn we played the Pete, we knew we could stop the You Have Forgotten Me, and their turn pretty much would have been Ink Pass if they had nothing to play, which they probably wouldn't because they want to save the ink for other stuff. And then you play another Pete, and you could do another turn of passing, and then you could set up your 5 drops. So that's sort of the lines you want to go for against heavy action-based decks, not just discard. Pete is a very good tool. We did play with 3 of him at EU Continentals, but um, after that we've gone up to having just the 4 because he's so useful. He's such a useful tool, especially as Stillsong is quite popular right now. And I think that might be a reason why Stillsong has gone more towards these stock mine builds because they can, still get that steel removal with the mines, with moving to the mines, and Pete won't be a problem for them. So that's really good for them. But yeah, Pete is very good against anything that's action based. Just keep that in mind. There are a lot of decks that aren't action based. Blurple, green purple as well. They aren't really action based decks. Mufasa, if you see any still lingering around, I don't know why you would. But yeah, he's just been such a powerhouse, and I think he's one of the cards that make Steel a bit more unfair. And I was tweeting about this earlier. Um, it's right now there are so many unfair cards in Lorcana. It makes sense to play the unfair cards, as they say. So Diablo is quite unfair. The fact that they get hand advantage whenever you just draw a card. It's just an unfair ability, and it requires so much to respond to it. And we get a Pete, but I still think this is maybe a little. When you have no cards in hand and a 5 drop questing for 2 a turn, this is maybe a little bit too late. But if we were able to maybe get all 3 of the rest of our Pete's in a row and just keep turning sideways, we could maybe get to a spot where there's so much lore and they haven't really done much every turn that we could win the game. But yeah, we really want that Pete on that turn where the Prince John was able to discard 4 cards from our hand. It would have just given us another turn of inking, so that meant when we drew that 5 drop Gantu, we could have played it rather than having to discard it, or we can get to 5 ink and then just play off the top, which has been a lot better spot. because Pete will stall it, but discard will do its thing and it will discard you eventually. But if you can stall it to get to that 5 ink and just play off the top, majority of the time you can win those games. So it's just keeping an idea of what all of the discard cards that they can do, and of course I should have inked that bare necessities, but I think I did ink a strength for that term anyway, so it didn't matter too much. But you should think, oh wait, they could probably get rid of this card from my hand. I should probably put it in the inkwell. Because singing bare necessities and not hitting anything is a really bad turn for them. Getting the sudden chill is not great right now when I have no cards in hand. And sometimes as well, if you were to draw a 1 drop off the top, it would make more sense to, if you're at 4 ink, just ink to 5. So that means your next top deck will be better. So getting to 5 ink can be a lot more important than playing like a 1-1 or 1-2 Mickey or a 2-2 Robin Hood on the board. Um, this is always that awkward spot when you play against discard, when you sat there with no cards in hand, they've got a giant hand size, and you're just sat there kind of waiting for your turn to draw your card and play it. I think maybe even a mana wouldn't be too great here either because they've got six 6 damage on board, so we can't really do much there. The only powerful thing is they can't really turn them aerial sideways because they'll be easy removal, and they kind of want them singers set up, and especially now they can't. Though they do have a very easy under the sea Kida, so if they ever find those 2 pieces, we're kind of out of the game there. But being at 14 lore as well, it's sort of impactful to show you in the game when we're not even in a strong spot because we're just going to play off the top and then quest every turn going forward. Um, Getting to 14 lore right now, it's still not a terribly bad spot to be in. They're still going to have to react. You know, they will eventually run out of answers. The Bruno was rough. We didn't know they have that. But that also was a good idea for shifting, just to play around Bruno. But to be honest with you, we weren't playing around it. We just shifted on 3. So that's not too bad. And right now, they need to find an answer for the Calhoun as well. So maybe they have another Bruno in hand. That wasn't too bad of a thing to lose the 1 drop there. But we're still at 4 inks. We'd have to ink whatever we draw off the top. But yeah, the Calhoun's pretty nice for the sort of snapback of whenever you turn anything sideways that she can remove, it's going to be rough for you. And I've really liked that about the card. So it locks the 1 drops down from questing. As something like an aerial here, now it's like you have to deal the Calhoun or make a problem for it. Um, that's just really good sequencing. And I think uh, this was when he realized he could have discarded more, but it doesn't really matter anyway. Um, no, I think that might be the next game. I can't remember. I remember it was quite interesting. But yeah, I think at this point is where we drew the card and we just thought to ourselves, should we just quit and go to the next game, or should we see how much further we can push the deck? Because we're only 6 lore off. They need to still get every piece they need, and yeah, we just start playing what we find off the top. And I think as well, it will come back to that point of the Mickey got us some lore here, but it really would have been better just to ink that and just play off the top. Even getting rid of this Pete is quite awkward for them if they don't have a Muse and paint the roses red, which we haven't seen yet, so they might have it, but we really have no way to play around cards at this point. We're playing literally the card we draw off the top of our deck and turning sideways. So it really is just, I think they played the ukulele down as well just to get it on the board so they could use it. Don't think the ukulele was a very much loved card this weekend on Friday. Sorry, it was supposed to be the card that yellow green got this set, but it just hasn't shined very well. Neither has yellow green. But yeah, even right now, Pete, it's fairly awkward for them to remove if they don't have a bounce or a Bruno, because they'd have to run 2 things in. It might just be that they could win the law race. We're probably never going to trade one of them aerials because what's the point? They've got so much singing power, and I think I'd value the 1 law more. Um, so yeah, right now, if that was a top deck Gantu, um, what we could have done there is, and we had inked the Mickey. Sorry, we got the Scrooge instead. But if that was a top deck Gantu and we'd have inked the Mickey, what we could have done is just quested. We played the Gantu down, of course. Instantly made a problem for them. We know we've seen a Bruno being used. I think we've seen a Bruno being inked as well. No, we saw 2 Brunos. Sorry. So they probably wouldn't have one, and it would be a very awkward spot for them to remove it. They might want to key it under the sea just 1 Gantu, that would be fine, but that means if we drew like another Gantu or another big quester, we could play that down and just start catching up the lore again. So yeah, I think definitely inking that Mickey would have been a better spot, but still getting to 17 lore is quite impressive for what this deck can do. I guess against yellow green, they do tend to let you get quite far ahead in the lore race before they turn the corner and start looking out of the game. But still, we've got 3 characters on board and requesting at 4 ink with 3 or the 4 discard turn earlier, so it's not the worst in the world. The deck what we found as well, a lot of these rounds, especially against Alphos, if you go watch this game versus Bessie, even on the draw with games that we lost or losing, we were still very, it was still very close. We still got lots of lore in. It wasn't like it was an absolute smash getting going on the draw. They had to really fight for it. It wasn't an easy game for them. So you could imagine as well, there's a lot of skill level differences. Cow's quite a good player. And versus certain players, maybe in your store champs, you'd easily be able to get the win, as they wouldn't be able to navigate these sort of later turns when you're only needing 3 lore to win the game. But yeah, I don't know much more to say whilst I watch Kawa think through the many, many options that they probably have to take here. And it's also at the point as well where it's one mistake and you're sort of out of the game. That's what this deck can keep doing to you. If you do one mistake in line, if you use one card incorrectly, like if you waste a Bruno here when you shouldn't have done, um, they can just lose the game from that aspect. So it is an aggro deck, but because of the ward and the big health characters and Pete and mana and stuff like that, it just constantly is asking questions to your opponent that they need to have a good game knowledge of to answer. So even for quite an aggro deck, it has quite a bit of depth with that, which I've been very much enjoying with the deck. But right now, if you had Muses and Paint the Roses Red, it'd be quite an easy answer for 2 of these characters. But still, you wouldn't want that Scrooge the quest to get to 19. And they did have to use 2 Brunos to remove 2 things, but we're just going to keep playing big characters that quest for a bit off the top. The only thing right now is we could get screwed by drawing a 5 cost, um, which could be quite rough. But the what's it called? Sorry, the Hidden Cove can be quite rough. Even into green steel, it's a upsetting card to see because before the Hidden Cove was played, you get quite a good trades there. But once it's played down, it's quite rough. So what you it's quite rough about 3 times there. What I like to do is you play your 1 drop, you play your Calhoun, you play Pete. Again, Pete being just a masterful card because it means nothing is going to happen to your characters for that turn. And then you can run the Calhoun and the Pete into the hidden cove and remove it, and then play maybe a Pluto next to it so they can't get you on the snapback, and you can just set up these really nice board states. So yeah, Calhoun into Pete has been very good. You get 2/3/3s. That can also take out a Hiram if needed, and you still get 2 lore. So that would be the same as you turning them both sideways anyway. Um, so yeah, Calhoun again, just another card that's a powerhouse. And we did try 3 in the list for a bit, but we went back up to 4 because she's so important, and missing a 2 drop is very rough. So you want to make sure that you can get. I think what we drew off the top. No, it was a 1 drop. Maybe again we should have inked that just so we could play for the next one. But the thing is, they can remove the Scrooge at this point. So if the Scrooge is removed, we're not presenting lethal. So only a 2/2 goon against yellow green is never the best because they could just hardcast under the sea or sing it here and set us out. They could run everything and hardcast it. But again, we got to 19 lore. I think for a lot of this game, if I was playing with 5 ink, I'd have just been feeling very confident. I wouldn't even like anticipated trying to concede and go to game 3, where I feel a lot more confident on the play. I would have just conceded at this point. I would have just sorry felt I was a lot in a stronger, more demanding spot here. Um, yeah, this is still presenting lethal. Still can be quite hard. I think they're trying to find the maths of the best way to deal with this. And you know they've probably got an answer when they're still playing the game. It would have been amazing to end it with a 1 drop Robin Hood just being able to quest it out. Use the ukulele on the aerial. And that's the mega play that Yellow Green got this set. And I'm still not trying to talk down the deck or say it's like bad or anything. But their play is play a 1 cost item, pay 1 to use the 1 cost item, and give a singer 3 so you can make it sing under the sea. Like if an aerial has singer 5, you can sing it on 1 turn, which is something, I guess, but not amazing. But yeah, if we were to draw a 5 drop, we can't even keep playing the game after this turn. But a card we did take out that would be good to buff this matchup. I think they have lethal anyway. They have 2, 4, 6, and I can't remember how much they quest for. I don't think they updated it, but yeah, we just scooped there because we couldn't. A card that worth mentioning could be included to buff this matchup if for some reason you needed to buff yellow green. That very popular deck right now is Wendy Darling, which we did take her out. But she's a 3 cost, 3/1 with ward. The support part is useful. You can buff your one drops, buff Calhoun, and remove more things. But what we found mostly is you play her, and every deck has either got to pay the most expensive removal, which is Be Prepared, or she's just going to get you 2 lore. So the majority of the time, she's just, even in this matchup, she's probably going to get you 2 lore. They will have to find the Kida and the Under the Sea, and they're kind of wearing a top deck, draw cards to find instant answers every turn moment there. So even Kida here would, even Wendy Darling would have been a good call here. But because of Under the Sea being stopped by Pete, I think we'd still just play Pete. But should have been an interesting choice. I think if we'd have top decked a Wendy Darling, that would have made a really good game there and played it out. But I think they might have found lethal at that spot. So we'll just skip ahead because we have a chat again. Awesome event. They also got us Domino's Pizza, which was really nice. So yeah, we're just going to go through. And we do find a Pete in the opener. And we find a Pete, a 2-drop, and a 1-drop. We find a Cogsworth and a Gantu. I go a bit more greedy for the what's it called, for the more Pete's, so I'd probably send the Gantu back, but it looks like that was the after mulligan hand. And again, if you were playing into green steel or what's it called, amber steel decks that don't have Under the Sea, I think having the Cogsworth is just a lot better spot to be in. But overall, that hand, there's a lot of options in there, as long as they don't have bare necessities and stuff like that. We're pretty good. I did the BM thing if they cut my deck and they said they're good, which I always feel really rude when I do it, but I seem to do it quite a lot. Probably should just cut it. We do actually, I wouldn't say an uninkable issue at this point, but it's something to work for the deck. If you are keeping cards like Calhoun and Alice in your opener, now in this match I would only keep the Calhoun, but if you're keeping Calhoun and Alice and then you say send 5 back, the deck only has between 12 and 13 uninkables on average. I believe the version I run has only 13, but it has gone down to 12. If you were to keep Calhoun and Alice, send them all back, and then draw like maybe 1 or 2 more uninkables, you're going to get into a spot where you're going to have to start inking cards that you don't really want to ink. And if you look at our hand, we have like 2 docks, I think, and a Calhoun in there. So we're already at a spot where we have to see the hand, actually, sorry. So we only have 1 dock and 1 Calhoun. But you can imagine if there was 1 more dock in there, and literally all those cards as well. We want Pete, we want Baboom, we want McDuck Manor, we want all of those cards because they're all really useful in this matchup. But instead, we are having to ink the cards that we kind of want to use here. We did draw another Baboon, which means we can ink it and play it. We're really debating if we want to just shut this shift line off because last game they didn't have it, and of course you see how bad it is if they don't have it. But if they do have it and they could shift sing bare necessities, which is the thing that yellow green's going to do, and they haven't done it the last 2 games, so upon average they're going to do it maybe one of the games out of the 3, and that would have been the one they did it in. I think they were quite as a roller coaster for them there. They mentioned that I inked Baboom and they thought, great, they're not going to use Baboom, they're going to play Calhoun, and then I just played a Baboom, and you saw they inked the bare necessities. So, and they had 2 bare necessities in hand, so they really had quite the stacked hand. If they have the shift line, we're just a really rough spot there where we kind of couldn't do much. So, and they're already attacking the hand. They get no characters on board, which is pretty good for us. But yeah, if we were to let them get that shift off and then sing bare necessities, just such a rough spot because the deck only actually has 2 Babooms. So if we inked one, played the Calhoun, we probably would have inked something else, but if we inked one, played Calhoun, we kind of just wouldn't have had anything to do. I think this Pete was the wrong play as well. I think we should have saved it for 4, or we should have saved it for after Prince John was set up. I think that was me just hoping they didn't hardcast another discard spell. And they had the Diablo in hand, so shutting off that shift line was like the biggest thing we could have done there. Um, Being able to mean they couldn't shift sing bare necessities. And getting to use the dock before the Diablo is used is pretty good as well, but 2 cards in hand's not great because you have forgotten me as such a big card. But yeah, getting the dock down, and I'll not into this matchup, but into a lot of matchups, one of my favourite turn 4s, if I don't have the Pluto, is to play Calhoun and dock, 2 bodies on the board and 2 cards drawn. And as much as I keep mentioning these really preset lines of Alice into Pluto is really good, on 4, if you're able to double spell and say 2 characters, or even, yeah, there you go. So dock versus yellow green isn't that great. But now we're going to be gaining 4 lore a turn. But yeah, if you're not able to do the Pluto, double spelling is just an awesome thing to be able to do. It's basically what Steel Song Dock Mines does as well. And just, this is what I really like about the deck right now. The amount of pressure we're putting on. They won't really have the ability to deal with any of these cards. They might be able to Bruno one of them, but we're going to be gaining 2, 4, 6 lore next turn. and then we can keep playing off the top. If we draw a mana off the top, it's just an amazing spot to be in. And this is why it's really nice to come back to playing an aggro deck where it's just play stuff down, turn it sideways, constantly making your opponent have to answer the threats on the board. And what I've noticed in Lorcana is right now it's much better to be the proactive deck, and that's why we're seeing Emerald Amethyst, these like quite aggressive Ruby Amethyst lists, Amber Steel, the Dock Mines. They're all doing a lot better than the other lists because being the proactive player and asking the questions is just being a lot better than being the reactive player. Which the only reactive deck that's doing very, very well right now would have to stay is Ruby Sapphire because Sisu is such a good reactive card. But on top of that, Brawl is not an amazing reactive card. Pay 3 ink to remove something doesn't feel great. Um, and then you've got Be Prepared is not amazing. It's a 7 cost action and all of your board gets removed as well. If you're able to sing it, that's pretty good. But overall, it's better to be proactive. And a lot of Sapphire Steel standard cards like the ramp and the no wheel, the no wheel and the wheel ramp one with Quill and everything, all of your reactive answers just aren't as good as Ruby Sapphire's ones. So it just doesn't feel that good in the meta right now because ramp into a Tinkerbell doesn't answer everything. Grab Your Swords has not cleared much these days either. So just playing this sort of proactive deck has felt really great to get back into. Even Pluto here is pretty nice. They're in this really strange spot now where they weren't going to challenge anything, but having a 5/5, even if you quest for one, I know the Scrooge would have been better, but it's still just a really awesome spot. And they aren't able to just play the Under the Sea. They need a Kida here to wipe everything. We do run on, and we don't have enough to sing Under the Sea as well, is what I keep noticing. It's not like I can interact with a Diablo anyway, or a Muse that has Ward anyway, but it was nice to keep saying that they could never really do Under the Sea, because we got to go first. We shut off that shift line, so they had nothing on board for about 2 or 3 turns there. Oh no, they did, sorry, on turn 3. They played a Diablo, but it was still drying, so it wasn't doing anything. Then they played You Have Forgotten Me, so they didn't play anything. And we're just going to play every character off the top. And as I say, I need to keep debating though, is this character worth playing or should I ink it? I think a Pluto here definitely worth playing. It took all of my ink cost to play it. But if we were to draw a 5-drop, it'd be kind of rough and maybe we should have inked the Pluto, especially when we have this many characters on board as well. Paint the Roses red can start to get the engine going, of course with the Muses as well. And it's very interesting to see what they would want to bounce here because if they bounce the Mickey, I can ink that card and that means I can play whatever I get off the top. If they ink they can use it on the Calhoun, so they'll probably use it on the Calhoun. But if they bounce the Dock, that could possibly be card draw, but it also gives Diablo card draw, so I probably wouldn't do that anyway. Um, so yeah, it's a very interesting spot to see where they'd actually want to put the Paint the Roses red and where they'd want to bounce the next turn. I think Calhoun definitely. Maybe you would just put one on Pluto or one on Scrooge or something like that. But definitely put one on Calhoun and bounce it, and then deciding, and what to bounce would probably be Calhoun. So actually, it's not that interesting. It's basically just play Paint the Roses red, bounce Calhoun. Hopefully, you get another good card. But 14 lore, they have no lore reduction. We're just pushing so far ahead, and that's what I'm saying. Even this matchup, well, I would argue is a very I wouldn't say it's the best matchup for us, kind of a bad one. We're still just pushing ahead and winning. We used the Pete at the wrong time, and 2 of the games we didn't even get the Pete. So, yeah, and saying the way you win this matchup is find 2 copies of a 4x in your deck is not a great way to say you win these discard matchups. But even without the Pete, we're just pushing so much lore. Everything's so cheap, we can just play it off the top. I can't actually see what card that is. That's mad. Oh, that is, Bruno. We don't talk about Bruno. Which is still rough because they're going to have to hardcast that. I think they really wanted to have an aerial setup so they could sing it. But we're being so proactive and pushing them and constantly saying, if they had spent a turn playing aerial or um, Prince John, something else. Yeah, aerial, that's the only one who can sing Bruno, sorry. But if they spent anything else on that turn, setting anything else up, even the Diablo hasn't been able to trade and remove anything. It's given them a card a turn, but it hasn't been able to give them anything else. So we're in a pretty good spot. And yeah, we just take that lore. I mean, it's sometimes best I just do the lore straight away so I can figure it out. And they bounced the Mickey to the hand, and I think after the game I did say it doesn't really matter too much, but what I would have done is ink the Dock, just because you knew I was at 4 ink. You didn't really want me inking anything that I bounced, well, you bounced if I had. And if you're bouncing things that can be Muse targeted straight away, I'm probably going to ink them anyway because they're just not going to be useful. So yeah, we just get to play more characters wide. And again, there's no way they can keep her Under the Sea. The game's pretty much locked. And if you've watched those lines, they weren't even that impressive. We had a little bit of thinking about playing when to play the Boom, We kind of wanted a mulligan for things like Pete, but overall the deck never feels that much like it's a strain on you. It's making a massive strain on your opponent because they have to keep thinking about answers, keep thinking about ways to deal things. Especially while the deck's quite new as well. People don't understand Alice, they don't understand John Silver. So there's just loads of benefits to playing this deck right now. And I think I'm really excited to see how it does at Store Champs. I hope a lot of people pick it up for Store Champs. That'd be really fun. And I'd love to do a video on everyone who covered it and maybe get like some short videos from every like you guys like sent in, and I can put them on the channel. But yeah, as you saw, watch back this game. Probably mute it because you're pretty bored of listening to me. If you're honest with you, I would be. But just look how simple it was. It was look for a curve, Pete, the boom. The only two things that we had to really think about in this matchup, compared to maybe a matchup where we wouldn't need Pete and the boom, like Ruby Amethyst or Green Purple or Purple Steel. But yeah, it was very simple, and we just go for it. And they show us that yeah, they don't have it. They have the Keeler and the Undersea, but because they never got that other singer set up, I think again, if they would have actually had a two drop, that would have been amazing, and they probably would have won the game. And there's those small moments in Lorcana that I love. That if they had a two drop set up, they probably would have won this. But that had to be an Ursula as well, because I probably could have got rid of the Sir Hiss. But yeah, there we go. Finished the game off. And as I was trying to make that point there, it's such a very simple deck. It constantly makes the opponent have to work the hardest in the matchup. It doesn't make you work that hard in the matchup. They have to constantly be thinking about answers, how they're going to deal with it, and you're like, hey, I'm just going to turn everything sideways, and I'm going to start questing. Baboom can be used on very important targets, like a shift line that's going to destroy you, like Diablo or Robin Hood. Pete, if they're an action-based deck. Use Resist if they're a challenge-based deck. McDuck Mana if they're going to board wipe. It's just those things. All the tools are in the deck. You just need to draw them at the right time. And we've had some really fortunate runs in the EU Continentals and the LCQ pods and at this Store Champs. So yeah, hopefully you enjoyed that, and hopefully you got some use out of all of everything I was saying there.